Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Utah State Capitol. I'm Governor Spencer Cox, and I'm excited to be doing this Facebook Live here with you tonight. We are streaming live from the Capitol, from my formal office. We've done these historically over the past year at least, from the mansion, but we decided to do things a little differently tonight, and I'm here, and lots of people working hard as we are in the middle of a special session, and I have a feeling we're going to talk a little bit more about that. I'm excited to be back with you. It's been a couple months since we've been able to do one of these, and I hope you find them informative. Please let us know if you think it's worth our time to continue to do these. We're always looking for new ways to connect with the people of Utah. I am excited. I apologize for doing this during a Jazz game. When we scheduled this, we missed that, and so I hope if you're not watching me, that you're watching the Jazz beat the Atlanta Hawks, and this will be about a half hour. So we'll definitely get you to the second quarter and the rest of the game if that's something that's important to you. And I apologize. I had someone tell me I looked very tired today, which is always a great thing to tell people. They're mostly right, but we're awake and again very excited to have this conversation. So I just wanted to start. By the way, I want to thank everyone who submitted their questions. We had more than 500, which is the most questions that we have ever received for one of our Facebook Lives, and we'll get again to as many of those as we can shortly. Let me start. I want to start because this is a very special week by thanking our veterans, our military heroes, those who have served before, those who are on active duty or are part of our National Guard and reserves. With Thursday being Veterans Day, we just wanted to take a moment to let you know how grateful we are for your sacrifices, for your service to our country, in preserving the freedoms that we so desperately enjoy. We love you. Serving as Commander-in-Chief of our state has been the honor of a lifetime, as I've been able to work very closely with, again, the members of our military on active duty, and I've spent a tremendous amount of time with our National Guard. We were just welcomed home this past week, over 100 members of the National Guard who had been deployed for the past year to our southern border, many of them in Texas, some in California and Arizona, and who have been sacrificing, again, more than a year away from their families, doing incredible work, intelligence work, and other things there, trying to protect our southern border, keeping drug dealers and others at bay. And some of them close personal friends of mine. I've seen the sacrifices that their families have made during that time. Of course, we've seen it over and over again with deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq over the past 20 years, and so many before. Speaking to our Vietnam vets, our World War II vets, those who served in Korea, the list goes on and on. Just know how grateful we are for what you've done to make our country a better place, a safer place, and we look up to you and admire you. So thank you for that. Okay, I do want to just announce this. I will be honoring our veterans at a public event on Thursday at 11 a.m. in the Union Building at the University of Utah. In addition, the Utah National Guard will host the 66th annual Veterans Day concert for Veterans Day. This year, it's a pre-recorded music concert that can be viewed online at ut.ng.mil. So Utah National Guard Military, ut.ng.mil. I hope you'll join me in saluting those in uniform. Okay, let's start with a few questions. So, as I'm looking at the questions that have come in, it looks like there are many of them dealing with redistricting, and so that's probably where we'll spend a significant portion of our time. And I appreciate, I won't read every one of these questions, but we will talk through and hopefully answer most of the questions that come your way. Let's start right here with a question about the Independent Redistricting Commission and the legislature's decision to override those recommendations. Let me, I guess, begin on this part by recognizing the difficulties with redistricting, and that many people are upset. 10 years ago, I was one of those people. I was working not on congressional maps, but on legislative redistricting maps. Sanpete County had been divided into 3 separate House districts. And it sounds familiar for those in Salt Lake who are upset about that. We'd been upset for 10 years, and we were working very hard. I was a county commissioner at the time. I'd been a mayor and a county commissioner before that, to try to get the new map changed so that Sanpete wouldn't be divided up into those three districts. It was incredibly frustrating for those 10 years. And I have no doubt that many of you are feeling that way. We've heard from many of you. I went and listened to almost all of the comments last night. Was able to read many of them from the hearing that was held last night on those maps, and it is and can be incredibly frustrating. So with regards to the legislature and their role and how all of this works, the law is very clear. The Constitution of the state of Utah is very clear that the legislature, and it only mentions the legislature, has the authority and the duty to make changes to those maps. Every 10 years, we do a census across the United States, and then the states divide up their congressional districts, and then their state house and Senate districts, as well as in our case our state school board district. So those are the 4 maps that we're talking about. And so unless and until that Constitution is changed, the legislature will always have that authority. Now I know many of you are thinking that's a conflict of interest, and you're right. It is a conflict of interest. I think that's fairly clear, that they get to kind of draw the lines within which they'll run. But for better or worse, that is the strategy or the process, I guess, that was chosen by the founders of our country and by the founders of our state. Now, there are some states that have changed that and actually changed their constitutions, if it was part of their constitution, to put in place these independent redistricting committees. That is not what happened here. There was a vote that was taken. It was a very close vote. I think it was about a 7,000 vote difference, approving an independent redistricting commission. Now, there were some changes made to that redistricting commission by the legislature after that, and that was mostly supported by the people who ran that ballot initiative. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it is only a recommendation and can only be a recommendation unless and until the Constitution is changed. And so the legislature is fully within their rights to actually make those decisions and decide where they want to draw those lines and those maps. And so we end up with the biggest debate has been around, and this was true 10 years ago when we ended up getting the 4th district. We had 3 and we gained a 4th district that year. The biggest debate has been around, do we have one district that would be mostly Democratic around Salt Lake City? Because it's important to note that these 4 legislative districts, congressional districts, have to be the same population amount. So we have to divide the state up. And that means, I think this year, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I'm guessing we're about 3.3 million people, so you can divide by 4. I was never great at math, but around 800,000, between 800,000 and probably 900,000 people in every district. So that means that there has to be divisions in counties somewhere, and especially in a place like Salt Lake County. And so where you put those dividing lines matter. There is a lot of talk about communities of interest. That is certainly one area where that is a good way to make maps, try to keep people similarly situated together, communities together, is something that I think is positive, and something, again, I argued for in Sanpete County's case 10 years ago. There are lots of other considerations. One of the big ones, and as a guy from rural Utah, I've been a big supporter of having rural areas in every one of our congressional districts. By the way, it's impossible to draw a map without having some rural areas in congressional districts. Again, all 4 of them. But it allows our, I believe, we get better representation, and it helps to overcome some of that divide, that growing divide that we're seeing between urban and rural Utah. Now, again, if you live in downtown Salt Lake City, you may not care about rural Utah. I hear that from legislators on occasion, and as one, I would always respond with, if you don't care about your food or your water or your energy or recreation, then you shouldn't care about rural Utah. But rural Utah does play a very vital role in our state's economy and in the lives of people who don't live in rural Utah. So I believe it's helpful to have people that represent all of those districts, that represent a piece of rural Utah in every district. And so I've always been a supporter of that type of divide. And so that's kind of the history of the Independent Redistricting Commission. So they did meet. We made our appointments. They came together. They proposed some maps, and the legislature is drawing their own maps. They decided, at least a majority of them decided that they did not want to accept those maps. They thought there was a better way to do that. And again, they're fully within their rights. Now, whether or not that is a good idea probably depends on what your political persuasion is. If you are a Democrat, I think Democrats, if you're a Democrat that lives in Salt Lake City, you're probably really interested in drawing a boundary that is mostly Democratic, right in the heart of the capital city, and making sure that there's a district you can win there. There are a lot of people that believe that we should have proportional representation. That whatever percentage of the state votes for Democrats, we should have that many Democrats in office. Whatever percentage of the state votes for Republicans. That's never been the way we do things here in our country. That is the way it's done in some other countries. There are some positives to that. There are some negatives to that. It's interesting to note the partisan makeup of the state of Utah right now. We have about, I haven't looked at the numbers lately, but just going off of memory, we have about 850,000 registered Republicans in the state of Utah. We have about 200 and maybe 40,000-ish, I guess, registered Democrats in the state of Utah. So it's about, is that about 4 to 1 or 3.5 to 1 comparing those two? Now, there are a whole bunch of people that don't belong to other parties, third parties, or are unaffiliated. I'm guessing it used to be north of 400,000, maybe unaffiliated, something like that. And so you get close to half the voters in the state that aren't affiliated with either party. And but if you're just going strictly by Republican registered voters and Democrat registered voters, it's I guess 3.5-ish to 1, somewhere around there. So there is a significant difference. One of the questions that has come up here, and I'll read this one now, is what would you do to, let me see, sorry, if I can find this. What would you do to change that? That's the gist of the question. So how do you change that? If you can't do it through a redistricting commission, again, without changing the Constitution, which requires a vote of the legislature, then how else are people supposed to do that? And the answer is, and this is something that I think is a little frustrating, because when we had the debate, the committee hearing yesterday on the congressional maps and all the other maps, there was a flood of people that showed up to complain or argue about the congressional maps. And then something happened. As soon as they were done talking about the congressional maps, almost everyone left. And that's always surprising to me, because the House and Senate maps, the state House and Senate maps, are perhaps the most important if you ever want to have an impact on the congressional maps. So in order to change the congressional maps, you have to elect people that see the state the way that you do. And getting more of those people elected, and where those boundaries are drawn is very important. So I always tell people, look very closely at how those boundaries are drawn and how Democrats help to draw those boundaries? And do Democrats support the House and Senate districts? 10 years ago, they did. There was a very large bipartisan support. I'm certainly hopeful that they will have bipartisan support for those maps as well as they come forward over the next couple days. And that's really how you affect change in the state. Another question about how frustrating it is to feel like you don't have representation, or a feeling like you will never be able to elect anyone from your party. Again, I having listened to and talked to people, and I've shared many of these sentiments with members of the legislature, had conversations with leadership, making sure that they're listening to what's being said out there and the frustrations that are being felt. But I will also say this: although the lines can be drawn, and there's certainly a partisan bent to those lines, if you have to divide counties, Republicans are always going to divide counties with lots of Democrats in them, and Democrats are always going to divide counties with lots of Republicans in it. It's happening all over the country. I've shared our maps with friends that live on the East Coast, and they always laugh at the gerrymandering that happens here, because they send me maps from places like Pennsylvania and Illinois and other states, Delaware, and they laugh at how crazy the lines are there, and how much true gerrymandering is happening. But my point is this: that 10 years ago, the argument was that no Democrat will ever win a race, and sure enough, two Democrats have won congressional races after those maps were drawn. Congressman Matheson won a race, and then Ben McAdams won a race against an incumbent. And so it's certainly possible. We've seen this week in places like New Jersey, where Democrats had a plus 17 or plus 18 Democratic majority, and a governor there came within just a fraction of a point of actually winning the governor's race, overcoming an 18 point or an 18 voter percentage swing in a plus 18 district, or plus 18 state. So it's always possible. But again, more importantly, and this is where I warn my party, I warn Republicans all of the time that I do worry that as ballot initiatives are passed and people weigh in on those initiatives, and then changes are made in the legislature, that eventually people are going to continue to be upset by that. And if enough people are upset, the fact that Utah has a Republican majority right now does not mean it will always have a Republican majority. It hasn't always had a Republican majority, although many of us aren't old enough to remember those times. But certainly going back to Governor Matheson and others before, Democrats dominated the state of Utah for a very, very long time. And I believe, again, as Republicans, if we're not responsive to the will of the people, that can happen again. And so I do believe it's important to listen to people, even and maybe especially those that we disagree with, and then make decisions accordingly. Now, the last question on this is one about will I veto these maps? And the answer is that I do not have plans to veto these maps, and there's some very specific reasons for that. And one being, we'll see what happens today. The congressional map passed with a veto-proof majority in the House. I suspect, I've been told, that the Senate has the same numbers and will likely pass with a veto-proof majority. If there's one thing you learn about me from these, you learn that I'm a very practical person. I'm not a bomb thrower, and I believe in good governance. And so I've been told that just a veto, just for the sake of a veto, is something that I should do. I just think that that's a mistake. It's a mistake for lots of reasons, but the biggest of which is I get to work with this. And again, a veto-proof majority is a super majority. And we have some incredible members of the legislature who worked very hard on these. I know it's easy to speak of them and denigrate them, and sometimes they deserve that. Most of the time they do not. and it's important for a governor to have a very close working relationship with the legislature. I can't pass laws, despite what I get told all of the time. I have zero legislative authority, and so I have to rely to get our agenda done. And we have some incredible things we'll be working on. We'll be talking about those over the next few months. We have a budget that we need to get passed that involves increases, significant increases. In fact, maybe the most increases we've ever seen for education, specifically focused on our low-income communities in our multicultural communities along the Wasatch Front, our at-risk students, and our rural students. You're going to be seeing significant legislation around water and water conservation, all of these things that we need to do to lower the price of housing in our state. We have a really important agenda, and it would make sense, it would not make sense to anger a supermajority of the legislature in a way that won't change anything, and make sure that we are focused on getting done the agenda that the people of Utah want for the next decade. So that's what we're going to be working on. But again, I understand the frustration and that people are feeling right now, and the place that should be directed is making sure that we elect people that have the same interests that you do, and are interested in maybe changing those maps the next time around. Okay, so with that, we have lots of other questions. Here's one. Let's see. From Emily in Bountiful: what happened to the N95 masks that are promised for all K through 12 students? My kids are in Davis District, Valley View Elementary, and never received a single mask from the governor's office. Were they purchased but never distributed for fear of upsetting parents? So this is really easy, Emily. So those masks have been purchased. They have been distributed to schools. Every school in the state has access to those masks. They are available for students. Some schools have chosen to just make them available in the classroom. Other schools have chosen to have students request those. And so if your students would like those N95 masks, they can go and request those from their teacher, from the office there. They should have them available. If they don't let us know because they've been made available, they were shipped out as soon as they came, everyone has access to those, and every school has access to those. So thank you for that question. Okay, so here's another question that we've got from Jason. Jason asks the question, thanks for saying nice things, Jason. I won't read those. There's probably a couple people here who disagree with you. My question is regarding police recruitment and retention. Are there any bills or plans to help departments attract and keep the best officers possible? It's a dogfight between departments to keep the best. And Jason, we've certainly heard this everywhere, unfortunately. We've spoken, I actually met with chiefs of police from across the state, as well as our county sheriffs, and it's a real problem. Of course, I have that problem at the state level with the Highway Patrol, which is an executive branch office, and we don't have enough people in law enforcement right now. I think right now we have over 60 open highway patrol positions. It doesn't mean you can speed. We've still got a lot of highway patrolmen out there, but it's a significant concern. And unfortunately, Jason, what we're seeing right now is this is a problem not just with law enforcement. It is a problem in every single occupation in the state of Utah. We have a big labor shortage happening right now. I could spend a half hour just talking about the labor shortage and what that means, and it's incredibly frustrating. We have some of our best experts working on trying to figure out what it is that is keeping our labor participation rate so low. Again, it's not just police officers. We're seeing it in hospitals, teachers, cooks, waiters, engineers, doctors, you name it. I mean, every single occupation is facing this right now. What we've seen is this has been exacerbated by COVID. There's no question. There are lots of different forces, and we can talk about what's happening specifically around retirements. We had a lot of people that maybe were planning on retiring but decided to stay longer. And when COVID hit, they retired. Others who retired early because of COVID and the stock market doing well. So that's certainly hurt on the front end. We have fewer young men ages 16 to 24 participating in the workforce than at any time in our state's history. So that's concerning as well. We're seeing it on college campuses as there are good jobs available on campus that students have no interest in because either they don't need it, because maybe mom and dad are paying for it. My wife and I had to work in college. We had to pay for our own way in college as we went through and got our bachelor's degrees at first at Snow College and then at Utah State. And that's just not happening as much anymore. There is more government support than we've had in the past, and some concerns about how much that is impacting the workforce. A lot of people changed their minds about working. Women and men who decided they loved having more time with family, and that they could live off of one salary in a home, and certainly that's impacted the workforce. So I don't think it's just one thing. I think it's lots of things. But back to your question, what we see is then an escalation, and that's good for workers as we see pay increase to compete and try to get the best workers. We're certainly seeing that again in law enforcement as one city will pay more to attract trained law enforcement from other cities. What we're hoping to do again is to get more young people into the workforce, get them the training they need so that they can fill some of those jobs. But there's no easy answer on this one. And if you're running a business right now, you're feeling it, and we certainly hear from you. So thank you for that. Another question right now. Do we have any initiatives to address mental health in this state? And this is from Ryan on LinkedIn. Ryan, thank you for this question. The answer is yes. We have several initiatives, and we will have several more. I'm very pleased. I want to say about 4 years ago, under Governor Herbert, I was able to start the Governor's Suicide Prevention Task Force. And while it was specifically slated to focus on suicide prevention, we broadened it even more over the last couple of years to focus on mental health projects across the state. Utah is being seen as a leader now in some of the programs that we've adopted here and that we're continuing to adopt, working very closely with the University of Utah and many of their programs. We've passed dozens of pieces of legislation. I want to give a shout out to my good friend Representative Steve Elison, who has really led this charge on mental health broadly. And we have millions and millions of dollars of funding for these new programs, many of them that have been just rolled out in the past year or two. There will be more that are happening right now that will be happening in this next legislative session. But we're changing the way we deliver mental health services in the state. So it's almost like a funnel. If we can start at the top where people don't have serious mental health issues, but just need a little bit of counseling or connecting. If we can get to people there before their issues get more serious, we can save a lot of taxpayer money, and we can certainly help to keep people healthier and alleviate problems before they get more serious. And then as we kind of go down the funnel to the more serious problems, we've been doing funding at every level of that funnel. So for example, we've significantly increased what we call MCOT teams, mobile crisis outreach teams. Too often when someone is having a mental health crisis, they call 911 or their family calls 911, and we send out we send out an ambulance and a police car and a fire engine, which none of them are trained to help with these mental health crises, and usually they only add to it as they draw attention to that. These mobile crisis outreach teams, we roll a nondescript car or van with 2 mental health professionals who can go and assess the situation, provide counseling or help right on the spot, refer to services or help take a person who needs it to more intense services. So those mobile crisis outreach teams are expanding. We've even got some funding for rural Utah now for some of our rural areas, which is very helpful. We are also just funded recently and will be expanding they're kind of a 23-hour mental health clinics, I guess. Think of them as urgent care. We have urgent care facilities, right? So if something happens to your child and it's 1 o'clock in the morning. Instead of going to the emergency room, we're trying to get people to go to these urgent care clinics where someone is always on staff, a doctor is there to help. The same thing, we don't have any of these right now, but we want them, and we're going to be building a couple of them here in Utah, where people can go or people can be taken. So this isn't like a state hospital or long-term care. This is short-term, helping people get stabilized and get the help that they need. So that's a big initiative, and you're going to be seeing and hearing much more about that over the next few months and over the next year. The last thing I want to say is, and we've seen again just some real tragedies mentioned tonight. Just heartbroken by a 10-year-old who had been bullied at school, that took her life in Davis County, and we just don't know. I always beg people, if you are not struggling with your own mental health, you know someone that is, and it's important to ask that question. If you've ever thought about suicide, if you're having those thoughts, and then question, persuade, and refer. You encourage them to get help and then refer them. And if you are one of those people, as you're listening tonight, who is struggling with your mental health, who maybe feels like the world would be better without you, please know that is not the case, and we desperately need you to stay. There are resources available right now for you. I hope everyone, and especially your children, has downloaded the Safe Utah app. This is, again, something we pioneered that lots of states are copying, and they should. It's an app on your phone, your smart device, your iPad, where you can, at the touch of a button, be connected with mental health professionals at the University of Utah. You can even do it anonymously if you choose, and you can have a conversation with someone who can help you overcome those feelings and make sure that you stay. Also, there is a suicide prevention hotline that we would encourage you to write down. Always have this number handy. Put it in your phone right now, even if you're not feeling that you need it right now. It's good to have in your phone so you have it. I want to make sure that I get this right. It's 833-372-3388. Let me repeat that, 833-372-3388. That is the crisis line. And Ryan just said, "Go Aggies." Thanks, Ryan. I agree. Fellow Aggie, we appreciate that. Okay, we'll try to get to a couple more. I know we said we'd keep this to a half hour, but we're getting close. Alan on Twitter says, "I was down at the Great Salt Lake earlier this year and saw how low the lake levels are. What can we do to reduce upstream water usage so the lake doesn't dry up?" Great question, Ryan. I mentioned earlier in our chat that you are going to see a package of bills around water conservation, unlike anything we've seen in the state of Utah. This is something that I am incredibly serious about. We've seen the drought conditions, the extreme drought conditions that we have experienced over the past year. I want to congratulate Utahns everywhere for cutting back on their water use. We saw tremendous changes and savings, but there's so much more that we need to do. The Great Salt Lake is an important ecosystem, maybe the most important ecosystem we have in this state for lots of different reasons that we don't have time to talk about tonight. But one of those bills will be around making sure that we preserve and protect the Great Salt Lake. I was in Washington, D.C. last month, maybe a little bit longer ago than that, just a few weeks ago. I met with Mitch McConnell and specifically talked to him about the Great Salt Lake and the need that we will have for federal help. Also met with Kevin McCarthy back there, the minority leaders of both the Senate and the House, and talked about the Great Salt Lake and the importance of preserving that ecosystem. It doesn't just impact Utah; it impacts the whole region, and so there's certainly a federal nexus there to make sure that we're worrying. But it's not just the Great Salt Lake; it's water conservation more broadly. So stay tuned, look for those bills, and when they come up, please make sure that you let your legislators know how important those bills are. Okay, let's see from Sergio on LinkedIn, any plans to reinvigorate the rural economies, such as Sanpete, where I'm from? Sergio, I don't know if we know each other, but as a fellow Sanpeter, it's nice to hear from you. Where I'm from with government incentives or initiatives, the answer is yes. We're in the process of the biggest change to economic development in our in at least the last 20 years. So there will be several bills that I've been working on with members of the legislature as well around economic
economic development. I won't go into all of those changes, but suffice it to say, for those who don't live in rural Utah, there's a huge impact there as well. For the last 20 years, our focus has just been jobs, 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 jobs. And jobs matter. Jobs are really important. But when unemployment is at 2.4%, when you have the fastest growing economy and the fastest growing state in the nation, we can be more thoughtful about that. We can be more careful about which jobs we incentivize and which ones we don't. Many of those jobs are coming anyway. And so we need to be more thoughtful about our people, investing in our people to make sure that we have the workforce for the jobs of the future, and that people can upskill and get better jobs and get paid more and take care of their families. So you will see a shift from jobs to focusing on people, which is, by the way, what employers want and need. That's what keeps them coming to Utah, is that we have the best people, not that we have the best incentives. So by reinvesting in our people and in their training and their education, the jobs will come. I'm not worried about that. But specifically as it applies to rural Utah, those incentives that we've been using, again, we need to be more targeted on what it is we're actually incentivizing and where we're incentivizing it. So where unemployment is still high, in our rural areas, that's where our focus should be. We passed a bill last year called the Red TIF. It's a rural economic development tax and something. I don't remember exactly what it all stands for. That's not what's important. What's important is that the deals we've been able to do to help businesses expand and attract businesses used to be like 20% rural, and now that's changing to where it's 60 to 70% rural. We've done several of those incentives in rural Utah over just the past few months. We also have a program in state government where we are moving jobs. These can be telework jobs from the Wasatch Front to rural Utah, allowing people from rural Utah to get great state jobs working for the state of Utah. And I think we're over 100 now, just since I came into office, more than 100 jobs that we've moved from the Wasatch Front to rural Utah, where there are more people and those jobs are needed. So really excited about the changes that are there. Okay. I've gone over what I promised you. I'm sure the Jazz are into the second quarter, but I did get one last question that I wanted to address over COVID cases and what is happening out there. So we've seen with the Delta variant in lots of states. In fact, every state has seen a surge of cases, and Utah is no different. Some surged much higher than Utah and have come back down to where they're lower than Utah. In Utah, something fascinating has happened, which is a little different than most other states. We've gone up. We didn't go as high as many other states, but we went up, and then we started to come down, and then we went up a little bit, and we went down a little bit, and then we went back up a little bit, and we're kind of stuck right there. There are a lot of theories. We've talked to a lot of professionals at the state and others who are trying to figure out what it is that is happening there. And it seems like there's a couple things at play that are maybe a little unique to Utah. So first of all, there have been these waves that have happened in different geographic locations in the country. We certainly saw it in the South. That's where the Delta variant really took off, and then it spread to other regions. So in the Northwest region, so think Idaho, which had cases, just bonkers cases, like double the rate of our high here in Utah. Washington and Oregon, who got up as high as we are about right now in Utah, maybe even a little higher. And certainly we were part of that first surge. Now, as they've come back down, and we started to come back down, what we're seeing now is kind of a Mountain West or kind of Southwest surge, where Colorado is higher than we are now. New Mexico is up where we are now. Arizona is going up. So we're starting to see that surge again. It feels like Utah's kind of caught between those two. Another piece of this is that we have the youngest population in the country, and which meant that we had fewer people eligible for vaccinations until just a week ago, when ages 5 through 11 are now eligible for vaccination. We also have the largest households, and everything we know about the coronavirus is it really spreads in households. So the more people you have in a house, the more likely you are to get it. That is also true of breakthrough cases. So the longer you're exposed to the Delta variant, the more likely it is that you will have a breakthrough case. And nowhere are you more exposed than in your home. So if one person comes home with the virus, the odds of everyone getting infected go up fairly significantly. And so because we have the largest households, we're also seeing some of those increases. And then part of it is just human behavior. Again, making sure we get more people vaccinated. That is the key to all of this. If you've not been vaccinated, please get vaccinated. The other thing that's important right now are boosters. Boosters that are available for those, and they're becoming more available all the time for different age categories. And those who are most at risk, we encourage you to get your booster to ramp up that immunity. And we've seen it help there. And again, now getting vaccinations ages 5 through 11, we believe will certainly help, and the experts believe will help in bringing that down, and encouraging people to wear a mask. If you are vulnerable, if you're not vaccinated, or if you're around somebody who is vulnerable, we would encourage you to wear a mask to help protect them. The good news is there's even more medications on the horizon. There is a pill that was just approved in the UK. It's been filed for approval with the FDA here in the United States. We're hoping over the next few weeks we'll get full approval for that, which has an incredible impact. It's a pill that can be taken after somebody tests positive for COVID. It's a little bit like Tamiflu for the flu, that helps significantly reduce hospitalization. And the experts that we're talking to really believe that as we head past Thanksgiving into December and January, that this pandemic will turn into what's an endemic, something we can treat, something with the medications and vaccines that we have at our fingertips that will be here amongst us, but won't cause the disruptions and unfortunately the hospitalizations and deaths that we've seen with these previous variants of the virus. Okay, I've talked too much and too long as usual. Let me just conclude by thanking all of you for your interest in what's happening in our state. Every time I start feeling bad about something in our state, I just talk to literally any other governor in the country, and I remember how awesome the people of Utah are, how grateful I am and how fortunate I am to be your governor. Again, I know this redistricting stuff is incredibly frustrating for many of you. My encouragement to you is not to disengage, but to further engage. Run for office. It's still about candidates. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, having good candidates really matters. And unfortunately, some of the best people on both sides of the aisle that would make incredible representatives don't run because they're not interested, or unfortunately more often because politics has become so terrible. So I would encourage all of us to be a little kinder, listen to people that we disagree with, hear them out, try to change minds instead of walling people off. I still believe that that's one of the biggest mistakes we've made as parties, is this idea that you have to be exactly like me 100% of the time, and that we're not actually trying to convert anyone to our side anymore. And we do that by listening, not by threatening, not by calling names. We do it by listening, trying to understand, and trying to make things better. So with that, thanks for all you do, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.